Hey kids, naturalist historian here. I'm gonna teach you about our boy, our greatest founding father, and the most well-known founding father, George Washington. Most content on this platform will most likely feed you a modernized, biased liberal agenda that both American political parties love to idolize about our 21st century, corrupting what the founding fathers thought and believed for their own political gain. I'm here to teach you about the actual thoughts and ideals they cultivated, without the nonsense dogma. To think they were a bunch of modern Democrat or Republican idealists that these so-called liberal and modern conservatives will make you want to believe is total think party propaganda. Our founding fathers, in a governing sense, were extremely less democratic and vastly favored a federal republic. Moreover, knew the dangers of a dense public rule led to the oligarchy exploitation of the populace we mostly have today. Our founding fathers were educated men who understood the general public lacked extensive knowledge, which led them to a more aristocratic constitutional republic with checks and balances, rather than a direct democracy. While the Founding Fathers are best known for their political achievements, many people do not know or cover the more politically incorrect history that may damage the modern status quo, especially in the formal education that the American public is taught. Their personal lives were marked by complex religious beliefs, intellectualism, with secret societies that are controversial to many, influenced by the Enlightenment era, holding deist views that battled with traditional Christian values. And, although they did not reject religion entirely, many were of Freemason origin, like George Washington, the topic of this video. This led to many traditional speculations questioning the influence of esoteric practices affecting the formation of American ideals. Turns out, history can be more complex than what Miss Susie taught you in history class. And yes, I'm looking at you, Tom. These secret societies later feuded in the future with other parties formed, like the Anti-Freemason Party founded in 1828, which I will cover in another video. Back on topic. Intertwined with the public and subjective beliefs, revealed an untold and far deeper layer of history of these men who shaped the nation. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was more than a general or a president. He was the living embodiment of the future American spirit. Washington's America, unlike today, was a nation built on strength, unity, cultural identity, and a national pride. His legacy is complex. His core principles remind us that being American means upkeeping not just liberty, but hierarchizing the nation, its heritage, tradition, and the people above all. He knew what the birth of a nation required. Washington's farewell address in 1796 warned Americans against the dangers of political parties and regional divisions. He concluded that Americans should be incumbent upon loyal ties to the nation identity over state and political party loyalty. Although political parties inevitably formed, driven by personal ambitions and economic self-interest, these political factions would prioritize their agenda over the good of the nation and its people, leading to infighting and gridlock. Washington saw these parties as a threat to the stability of the republic, dividing Americans into competing camps rather than uniting them under the common virtuous will of the people. Washington knew that party loyalty would replace love of country. Americans would become more devoted to their political faction than to the nation itself. Don't just listen to me. Here's two quotes from the man himself. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has been perpetrated by the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. George Washington. And the common and control mischief a spirit of party are sufficient to make an interest and duty of wise people to discourage and restrain it. George Washington. Modern American politics is dominated by two major parties that are often more interested in defeating each other than in governing effectively. This has led to gridlock, polarization amongst the populace, and a breakdown of civil and public discourse. Despite their rhetoric, the two major parties, Democrat and Republican, often seem to offer too little difference in policy or vision. This leads to widespread disillusionment of voters, who feel their choices are limited and their voices aren't heard, which has come true in Washington's predictions. Washington feared that partisanship between parties in government would undermine national unity, which has proven tragically accurate. Today, Americans are increasingly divided along political, racial, cultural, and geographical lines with little sense of shared purpose and common identity. George Washington was initiated into Freemasonry on November 4th, 1752. At the age of 20, he joined the Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia. His decision was highly influenced by his desire to connect with influential men of the era. Some say through his half-brother Lawrence Washington, who was well connected in Virginia. That is where he may have cultivated the idea. Freemasonry was growing amongst the aristocracy of the colonies at the time among the elite and military officers. This is most likely where he got his Enlightenment ideals, morals, and civic virtues. Washington's views on freedom of religion were very controversial in the era, especially among the traditional Christians. Although at the time it was meant more for freedom of Christian denomination, but many confuse it today as all religion. But wait, you may be asking. Miss Susie taught me otherwise. Well, Miss Susie only taught you what you're allowed to think, Tom. It was mainly meant for freedom of Christian religion and mostly Protestant, implied by his naturalization views of citizenship and immigration policy. Yes, mostly Protestant because many Catholics were not allowed to vote in many states or obtain position in elected and government offices. Though well intended, his views have been corrupted and twisted by partisan political parties that contributed to the erosion of unification between national identity rooted in shared faith and tradition. George Washington believed that immigration should serve the nation's interest. He was cautious about unchecked immigration, emphasizing the importance of assimilation. Washington feared large numbers of immigrants, especially those who do not share a nation's values or have dual loyalty, would create division rather than unity, weakening the social fabric of society. Washington's views on the Naturalization Act of 1790 were very heavily influenced by the Federalist Party. Although not a member, he had close views of the party. The act restricted immigrants from obtaining citizenship that weren't free white persons of good conduct who lived in the United States for 2 years, focusing on European immigration and excluding indigenous tribes of the Americas, slaves, and other ethnicities from upholding citizenship. The first Naturalization Act of 1790 was passed by the First Congress of the United States, which Congress was heavily controlled by the Federalist Party, and was signed into law by George Washington himself. There was also later developments like the Naturalization Act of 1795, the Alien and Sedition Act of 1798, but that's a topic for another video. Washington viewed that voting should be reserved for those who had a vested interest in the nation's future, to mainly only free white men who were property owners and of tax qualification, varied by state. Rationale was that those who had a higher financial stake in society were more likely to make responsible decisions of governance rather than the uneducated populace. Washington was skeptical of pure democracy, which he associated with mob rule and instability. He favored a republic form of government led by the educated, propertied men who could rise above personal interests and govern for the good of the people. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, hit the like button, subscribe maybe. See you later.